Well, a very warm welcome along to the Future Renting Conference in Cardiff. We've got around 200 delegates in the room behind us, and this is the second time that the conference has landed in the Welsh capital. And I'm joined by Douglas Haig, Vice Chair of the Residential Landlords Association. And Douglas, a year on, I can hardly believe how quickly it's passed, back in Cardiff. And I guess what we can say of the past year is that the only constant has actually been change.
Absolutely, it's you turn one way and then you look the next, and there's something else coming out the woodwork. There's comments from ministers, there's comments from third sectors, and the pace of change just seems to be accelerating. And you add that to the devolved environment as well, and it's becoming really quite an interesting time for landlords, and really important time for people to keep abreast of what's going on.
Indeed, and I think it's important, as you mentioned, that the law is very different across the UK and actually becoming increasingly devolved. And your presentation was really about what obviously landlords here in Wales can expect going forwards.
Yeah, it's to set the scene really. I mean, we've got some excellent speakers today and giving us context from both Scotland and the changes that they've introduced, because very often some of the laws that you'll see coming across or coming in now are actually things that are either been in place or discussed quite heavily in Scotland. So I think it's really important to keep that relationship going over there and keep an eye on that. And we've also had this really interesting fact that a couple of years ago Wales was looking to diverge from the way that UK renting law was, but lots of things have happened, and there's been lots of delays within something called the Renting Homes Act, and that hasn't implemented. And during that time, actually, England's taken a lot of steps to change its legislation and done that quite quickly. So we're actually finding a situation where Wales is, despite the fact it was going to go off on its own, has remained doing a lot of what it was doing originally, and England has actually changed things through like the Planning Housing Act, things like the HMOs, room sizes regulation changes, and general HMO aspects as well. So it's really, really important, because I know there's a lot of people in England, a lot of investors in England that actually invest in Wales, and to a certain extent the other way around. So it is very important that we do understand when we're buying, or if we're not necessarily hands-on with things on a day-to-day, how those changes are impacting us, because they're coming from all different angles now.
Absolutely, and one of the things going on in Wales is obviously Rent Smart Wales. Do you feel that that's been a success and that it's contributed to raising standards?
I've yet to see an impact of it raising standards. I think I've made it no secret that we are not a fan of a blanket registration scheme itself, and the reason for that is not because of the goal of raising standards. We're fully behind that. It's the fact that what happens is that the local authorities and government get focused on this aspect of whether you register and licence, rather than what is the quality of your management, what is the quality of your property, and how are you running that, and how are you delivering that. So you'll see now that actually a lot of prosecutions of landlords have been around failure to register and licence, and not around poor standards or not delivering the right quality of property to a tenant. So I feel that's a distraction. The other aspect of Rent Smart Wales, which I'm very concerned about, and we warned about at the beginning, is that inevitably when you create complex legislation that's not been tested before, you create bureaucratic barriers. So you're now getting issues around the website not updating quick enough. You're getting people that are not able to serve Section 21 notices because there's glitches on things, or they haven't ticked the right box on the website, when actually they're registered and they're licensed and they're doing everything right, but the problem, because they're not ticking the right box at the right time, they're failing to be able to take possession of their property back. Something that our beloved David Smith loves, because it's a lawyer type thing, but ultimately in terms of the practicality of being a landlord, it's just a barrier which takes you away from doing the right thing, and focuses you more on filling in pieces of paper. So it is here to stay, but that doesn't stop us from criticising it and picking it up when it's going wrong, and it doesn't stop us from trying to work together to make it better.
Indeed. And talking of David Smith, he's on stage now. Yeah. What other speakers have you got lined up? Because we've got representatives from government, which I know is it really does add kudos to the whole event that we've got government here.
Absolutely, we've got two ministers. There's not many industry conferences can say that they've got two ministers, and the great thing is we've got the housing Minister for Wales coming here, Rebecca Evans, this afternoon to give us an update on how she's seeing the sector in the market. She made a very bold statement in her first speech. It was a few weeks after she was appointed, saying that she saw the importance of the private sector and rented sector in Wales, and that she was going to work with us and continue to do that. She has been open to us. She has spoken to us. Okay, she hasn't listened to everything we've said yet, but that's about building a relationship over time. So we look forward to continuing that relationship. We've also got Justin Tomlinson, who's the Minister for Child Support and Families. Now he's stepped in at the last minute because Esther McVeigh was going to come along, who's the Minister for Welfare. Unfortunately, she resigned because of that dreaded B word that keeps on going on at the moment. So she put it at the last minute, and Justin Tomlinson stepped in. So we're very grateful for that minister to step in, because welfare is such an important aspect for so many landlords. It's about a third of our membership say that they take some sort of welfare. I actually think the way universal credit works, a lot of landlords don't know that they're taking tenants on universal credit. So I would say that percentage is probably quite a bit higher. So he's coming to speak to us about the changes that are going on in welfare and universal credit. And despite the fact that for a number of years now, it does feel like we've been banging our heads in terms of engagement with DWP, Department of Work and Pensions, the last year has seen a step change. We've done a lot of research through our Pearl, which is a research laboratory, which we're very grateful to any landlord that contributes the data towards that. That's been regularly fed back to them. They've started to listen to it. We've recently published a report with Manchester Met University over homelessness and the reasons behind homelessness, and the fact that's very much linked to welfare. They're taking those comments on board. They're doing something about that, not at the pace of change that we would like, and not changing everything that we want to, but it's government. You can't expect radical and changes overnight. So the fact that he's made that effort, he's coming here, he's taking questions, he's done it at short notice, I think really shows the importance that he's placing on the landlords here and the RLA's involvement, and how important the private rented sector in general is to housing supply and welfare.
Well, that's very good to hear, and we hope to talk to the Minister later on, actually. I think, going back to the concepts of the events, future renting, thinking about what's coming down the pipe, really to me, what it actually boils down to is mitigating risk.
Yes.
Because if landlords are prepared and informed, prevention is always a lot less costly, a lot less hassle, a lot less heartache, a lot less expensive than cure. So this event is really, I think, putting landlords, into prevention mode.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think actually the deposit protection talk is entitled exactly that. It's around prevention better than being the cure. So it's how do you make sure that you get your property back in the way that you gave it to them in the first place, and not have disputes in the first place. And that's just an example of everything that we're trying to do here, is to make people aware that when they invest or they change their strategies, or because people are obviously looking at what's going on with taxation, how's that impacting my bottom line, the energy efficiency standards are changing, that's very costly for landlords. People are re-evaluating it. It's no longer I buy it, I hold it for 20 years, and then I either sell it or pass it on to my kids, and I get an income during my pension. This is being a landlord is now an active, changing investment process. So it's about engaging with that and making sure you're up to date with it. And when you get information from ministers, and when you get information from the RLA, it's actually being able to say, well, what can I do about that? What does that mean for me? And that's, I suppose, what we are trying to do in our communications, is when a minister changes something up here or something gets announced in the budget, very often you look at it and go, it doesn't impact me. And actually you go into the small print and you read through the big document that comes out afterwards, and you go, there's that impacts us. And so what we do a lot is we figure out how to translate what the legislation means into how we can practically help landlords get through that, and whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. So, someone like David Smith picks up the technical details, and that has a consequence for that one, a bit like the situation we had with the pregnant women in room sizes, when if they were in a room size and fell pregnant, that actually the landlord wasn't able to evict them because they were pregnant, but actually they were illegal to be staying in there because she was going to have a child. But technicalities which fall through the net with government. So we try and pick that up and try and translate it and make sure that landlords are compliant, so that they don't have to be a legal expert themselves.
Well, indeed, and I think the Residential Landlords Association is standing for, so many good things in the private rented sector, finding common ground, trying to improve standards. Obviously, landlords here, we're speaking to the converted. What we really need to do is we need to give the landlord associations an even bigger voice, as government attacks are likely to continue. So anybody watching this who isn't a member of a landlord association, we would say join one. Obviously, there is a choice, but the more that the landlord associations have support from landlords, the greater your influence and voice can be.
It is. We've said this for years as well, and ultimately we're still probably representing less than 5% of the entire sector between the main landlord bodies that we all know of. And it's about the volume of voice, but also about the style of voice as well, and that's really important. Is that you can scream and shout and say this isn't fair, but that isn't how you make change happen. You do it with coherent debates, you do it with evidence, you do it with being able to sit around a table with somebody and somebody be willing to take on your opinion. Because at the very beginning, you've got to remember that these ministers and these civil servants are having really powerful, emotive stuff coming to them from some of the third sector organisations or charities, or they open their post bag when they go back to their constituencies and they see some terrible things happen because nobody writes to their MP and says, "Dear Mr. Mrs. MP, just want to let you know I've got a great landlord, got a lovely property, and he always repairs everything when he should do." That doesn't happen. They just see the bad stuff. So they're coming from it from that aspect and angle. So we've got to make sure that we're getting into a room with them and that they're willing to listen to what we're saying. And because we're not necessarily in their constituency, so therefore they don't necessarily have that tied link to us. So, and you can only do that if you're taking the time to present the arguments in a way that they can understand. And I don't mean that in terms of stupidity, because these people are not stupid people. These people are just very, very busy people with lots of demands on their time. So it's about taking 20, 30, 50, 100 pages of a research document, condensing it into something that says, well, this means this, and this means this, and this is the consequence of that. And it's working. Changes are happening because of what we're doing. Not enough, not quickly enough, not what everybody wants. And ultimately, as I've just said, just because some people want to keep it the same as it's been for 20 years, but just because it's been done for 20 years doesn't mean it's right. And sometimes we have to mature, sometimes we have to adapt to the market needs. We are providing a service in the end of the day, and we need to see what the market wants and needs, and we've got to adapt to that.
Indeed, absolutely. Well, that's a great point to end on, because I think events like this, they are part of that change. They are part of that engagement with ministers and helping landlords get their points across right from the coalface, speaking to landlords actually involved in the issues that are affecting them can really help them get a clear understanding. So it's shaping up to be a great day, and we'll have more from the Residential Landlords Future Renting Conference here in Cardiff. So stay tuned.
Thanks very much. Thanks for being here.